Let's rank the big four of thrash metal. Ever since the big four of thrash metal, Anthrax, Megadeth, Metallica, and Slayer knelt down and got knighted by the metal community, it's obviously been debated which one is the best. And in this video I just wanted to go over my rankings for them as well as give you my reasoning as to why. But this is as much for you guys as it is for me. You can let me know down in the comment section below your ranking of the big four of thrash metal because they're all phenomenal bands, and the big preface for this video is they all have fantastic material, and my ranking is by far not the gospel. But I want to hear your guys' rankings regardless of the reason, whether it be you just fuck with them more or it's a personal meaning to you, something attached to it, whatever it may be, you can let me know down in the comment section below. But without further ado, let's get into the video. And if you end up enjoying it, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you're new around here. So at number 4, and this could be a shocker or a non-shocker depending on who you're talking to, I'm going to put Anthrax. And I've went on the record saying that I really do believe that Anthrax has gotten to the point to where they've been overrated because people think they're underrated. But much like a bunch of great movies, TV shows, and games and books get very overhyped for good reason because of their quality, I think that there is something to be said about things getting underrated or dismissed compared to other things in the same way. I do enjoy Anthrax, but I just think that every attribute that they have can be outdone by another one of the big four, and that's not even getting into other contemporary thrash metal bands or the big four of German thrash metal, which I think in their own right curb stomp Anthrax. I've always thought that their shredding was never as good as Slayer, their songwriting and attention to detail with riff writing was never as good as Megadeth, and their catchiness and accessibility was never to the same degree of Metallica. I think that their production style was very mundane even in the past when low fidelity production was seen as a good thing, and I just think that they did not advance fast enough compared to every other band that was in their lane at the time. And this is in no way shading or dissing Anthrax, because they do make great music. It's just I think they're rightfully ranked at the bottom of most lists for a good reason. Considering most of their standout moments that a lot of people praise them for, I think could be gotten for the same effect, the same if not better from the other of big four, let alone other thrash bands. With that being said, the top 3 is very difficult to rank for me because all 3 of these bands mean a hell of a lot to me. And I think the gap between them definitely just depends on the day, and I really thought long and hard going into this list who was going to get what spot and for what reason. So don't crucify me, but at number 3 I'm going to be putting Megadeth. There has long since been an argument over Metallica versus Megadeth, especially if you consider the fact that Dave Mustaine was kicked out of Metallica, blah blah blah. But regardless of how you really quantify it, Megadeth and Metallica have a lot of similarities, but they also have a lot of differences. It's a matter of perspective and preference because Metallica's highs, in my opinion, are better than Megadeth's highs. But by the same token, I think Metallica's lows are worse and lower than Megadeth's lows. Both have a very ho-hum recent output in recent memory. Everything from Dystopia forward from Megadeth I've just been mad on, and everything since Hardwired I've just been so mad on where Metallica is concerned. With that being said, like I said with Anthrax about how I think other bands do what they do better, I really do get a lot more out of the next 2 bands on this list, I'm not going to spoil the order, than Megadeth. I also personally think that a big issue that Megadeth has always suffered from, even on their classics, is they a lot of times would choose style over substance and would put a lot more effort into crafting these songs that you knew were supposed to get some sort of reaction, instead of just toning it down and trying to make really catchy songs or just songs that hit a specific stride if they were going for something heavier. And this is why I think that both of the bands that are coming after them succeed them more, both in the soft department and the heavy department, because I think that Slayer out-shreds and out-riffs Megadeth, and I personally think that Metallica out-lyrics, out-songwrites, out-vocalizes, out-ballads Megadeth on pretty much every single front, and Megadeth have a lot of great material, but the only thing that prevents me personally from putting them higher on this list is I do think that a lot of their material just comes across as okay as opposed to great. Because if you're someone that really overhypes Megadeth and you love them, you die hard for them, that's totally fine, but just look at their discography and ask yourself how many of their deep cuts are not only memorable but worth checking out. And if you compare that to the other 2 bands that are about to come up on this list, I think Megadeth has more material that just skates by and plays with a formula, plays with a pattern, and when you combine that with their most recent output just being painfully boring, that's why they place here on this list. So we're on to the top 2, and one thing that I think needs to be said is right right up here you can't see it, but in my video, have you guys ever seen like the ticket that is taped to my wall, the concert ticket? For those of you that haven't been able to either zoom in or see it, that's actually when I went to see Slayer on their farewell tour. Both Slayer and Metallica mean a hell of a lot to me and a hell of a lot to a lot of people, and so picking between them, like I said, it just fucking depends on the day. It's a gap. But I'm just gonna go ahead and give you both of my reasonings for both of them back to back, since there doesn't need to be tension. At number 2 is gonna be Slayer, and at number 1 is going to be Metallica. So the reason that I place Slayer above Megadeth and Anthrax and why I like them so much is I think that they service a mood that a lot of thrash metal bands not only took their influence from, but redefined the niche in a lot of ways. Because while a lot of other thrash metal bands sort of made their sound a little bit more digestible and accessible and publicly recognizable over time, Slayer just never stopped kicking ass and taking names. And even into their later catalog, I think they had a way of writing riffs that were not only compelling, but were simplistic enough to where you could just turn it on and enjoy it and headbang and not have to think too much about them. They sort of had this tightrope walk where they successfully were able to make music that was simplistic enough and fun enough and shreddy enough to just enjoy on its own, but also music that you could tear apart, that you could talk about, that you could say a lot of things about the way that they approach solo writing. And I think that Slayer does not get enough love and appreciation for what they did for riff writing, what they did for heaviness, and how much they influenced death metal bands, black metal bands, thrash metal bands, heavy metal bands, and how much they did for the new era of American heavy metal music that came about in the 90s and 2000s, with a lot of these bands being heavy metal and alternative metal, but so influenced by thrash metal. And if you look at some of these bands, I will use an example of like Lamb of God, you can very much see the way that Slayer influenced that riff writing in a way that you cannot really say about Megadeth, Metallica, or Anthrax. And of course, these bands inspired a ton of other bands. I'm not saying that they didn't. I'm just saying if you look at heaviness, and I love heaviness, I love brutality in music, I love intensity, I think Slayer intelligently wrote their riffs in a way that has stood the test of time, and for guitar players, it's fantastic. And generally speaking, I'm going to turn on a Slayer record more than a Megadeth or Anthrax record. But that kind of moves me on to Metallica. This is pretty self-explanatory, but Metallica have always been one of my favorite bands. I've said this on the channel multiple times, and I understand that they have some really low lows. If you look at records like Saint Anger, which I do think is a little bit overhated, or Lulu, which you can kind of appreciate where they were coming from experimentally a little bit, but even like as a diehard fan of them, I can't even defend a lot of their lows. I haven't really been a big fan of their newer releases. Their past 2 records have been incredibly forgettable, but I think they are status quo in a way that is kind of inoffensive, but their highs are fucking outrageously high. And I don't think I would have been the same person in my music listening catalog if I wouldn't have grown up with records like Kill 'Em All, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All, the fucking Black Album, the highest selling metal album of all time for a good reason, or especially my favorite Metallica record, Ride the Lightning. There are so many phenomenal Metallica records, and even some of their later records like Load and Reload, I think have a lot of really standout tracks on them. And even if they do get kind of dismissed and talked poorly of solely because they're being held up in comparison to the amazing classic records I just talked about, I think that at the end of the day, Metallica just has a catalog that you can't fuck with, and the numbers show, and sometimes things are statistically high because of their amazing writing. If I had a gun to my head and someone said, you have to sing an album front to back, or you have to sing as many songs as you can from a band or artist, I'd be like, throw on Metallica, throw on the Black Album, throw on Ride the Lightning, like, I got this. The diversity and dynamics in their songwriting, the versatility of how they approach things, the way they revolutionized multiple different genres, and took so many of the hallmarks of speed metal, took it into the mainstream, and redefined popularity and what it meant to be a household name as a metal band, is something that very few other bands can say in this community, unless you're like Linkin Park or Pantera or System of a Down, and even even then, no shade to them, they will never be to the level that Metallica both was and is. Whereas the other three of Big Four kind of have a pretty static sound that you can understand what you're going to get from them. You see so much experimentation in Metallica's works. You have thrash metal, you have ballads, you have rock, you have alternative, you have so many different influences coming into the fold to create this really up and down roller coaster ride of a trajectory from their discography, and that for me is why I rank Metallica at number 1. And that's not even getting into my personal attachment to the band, what their songs meant to me, the time in my life that I found out about them, and how I grew up with them. Even just objectively, if I had no attachment to these 4 bands and only was talking about it from just a songwriting perspective and how much I respect what they are capable of doing, Metallica 10 times out of 10 would take the number 1 spot. With that being said, what are your guys' opinions of the Big Four of thrash metal, and what would your ranking be? Let me know down in the comment section below. I can't wait to hear why and discuss it with you. But for now, like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.